We'll do a little on Randall later, but just like to alert everybody, because this matters in today's pathetic society. Instagram official Julius Randle has unfollowed the Knicks.
Maybe he knows something that nobody else knows quite yet.
He has unfollowed
That's crazy.
the Knicks.
That's awesome, though.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you want him gone.
That's what I mean.
That's what I'm saying. So I think it's awesome. I just wanted to make sure that you thought it was all. You're not even a Knicks fan.
I'm not.
So what do you think it's awesome?
But I see the value of moving on from Julius Randle.
You have to. Who knows? Maybe the Lakers. Maybe one of these teams that, has a year or two window. It's getting a little bit old, a little long in the tooth. Obviously, LeBron's been banged up. AD's always in and out. Who knows? Maybe something's there. Goes back to the Lakers, but it is over. And apparently he has, when you click that little button and you unfollow, it says a lot. So we'll do a little hoops later on in the show. Obviously, next week is all football. Oh, I wanted to get this too. The the messiness with MLB and MLBPA. But on a lighter note, and I know that there's no right or wrong answer, but I don't know. And somebody's going to have to convince me of this. Did you see the list, Teak, of Derek Jeter? ESPN's list for the all-time
Did not.
MLB greatest. Okay. So they compiled the list 1 through 100, right? 1 through 100. They actually put Derek Jeter. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. It's like my kid's not sure if you're listening. You listening, kid? 28. Come on. Ahead of somebody like Gwynn and Pete Rose. I mean, even the most ardent Yankee fan has to laugh at that. That is ridiculous. So we'll have a little baseball conversation later. Not to disparage Jeter, but maybe try to put him in the right place, obviously. So, Tiki's main point, and it's been all about the Giants really since we launched the show. Mm-hmm. If you really think about this, January 3rd, Judge was still the coach, and now we know where we are now. You were disappointed in the Giants' lack of response and really distancing themselves aggressively from the claims and the suit.
Yeah, they responded.
From Brian Flores.
They responded. I just felt like it was not angry enough. And now they finally have responded aggressively. And I think it's right on point, man. I appreciate their decision to point out all the little details that proves, but from their perspective tells you that this lawsuit is frivolous, especially as it pertains to the New York Giants. Can't speak to the Denver Broncos. Don't have nothing to know nothing about the Miami Dolphins. But the fact that they responded this way, laid it out really moment by moment, the process that was going on as they were looking for their next head coach, it just shows you that they did this thing right. We talked about this from the beginning of their process of first of all, moving on from Dave Gettleman as he retired, then firing Joe Judge, hiring Joe Shane, then going through the process of finding the next head coach. And we knew it just felt right, even though we were watching from afar and didn't have intimate details of what was going on. We just knew that they were doing the right thing, and they kept a detailed timeline of how this all went down. Now, this Brian Flores lawsuit truly implicates them. I mean, in a way that just sounds... It's harsh. It's your alleged racism of from an organization, which obviously we talked about earlier this week. I have a lot of reference for, and without having real proof that the case was really in Brian Flores' favor, it's incendiary. It's damaging. It's damning. You can't just keep relying. And I think this applies just more to sports as well. You can't simply use racism as a catch-all for the ineffectiveness of diversity initiatives like the Rooney Rule and other things that are going on out there. It just becomes so explosive. And as we talked about yesterday, people get on the defensive. They start screaming at one another. And before you know it, progress, if there was progress, gets retarded. And it doesn't move forward in any effective way. And so for the Giants to come out and put this very clearly and succinctly, their stance on this, I thought was amazing. And the biggest thing about it, and I guess we kind of knew this intuitively, but until they laid it out, it clearly in ink, did it really make sense? So they're talking about this Bill Belichick text message. The Bill Belichick text message, which pissed off Brian Flores so much that he crafted this 58-page lawsuit with two lawyers who, whoever they are, crafted this 58-page lawsuit that's full of flowery
I think they're
language
poly prep lawyers, by the way.
Whatever they are.
Well,
I
he
don't
went
care.
there. It's interesting.
True, but whatever. I
think they're poly prep.
It's so like all over the place
yeah.
and playing to the court of public opinion. And the crux of it with the Giants is Bill Belichick sent a text message to Brian Flores saying congratulations, thinking it was Brian Daboll. The Giants in their statement said this: the text exchange that occurred the day before that text exchange, it happened the day before Coach Daboll's in-person interview even took place. So the Giants aren't going to hire a coach based on a 20-minute Zoom conversation. So it almost makes mute this idea that Brian Flores can allege racism because Bill Belichick, who has nothing to do with the Giants organization. I thought they handled this the right way. They were aggressive, and they laid out the timeline, their interactions with Brian Flores, and how they ultimately came to their decision to hire Brian Daboll.
One thing, I agree with everything you said, by the way, but one thing that I said that you didn't really necessarily agree with, I don't know that you vehemently disagreed. I just don't think you paid as much or put as much stock into it as I did. One of the issues I had was that the NFL offered this blanket refutal.
Yes.
Within 36 minutes getting the 58-page document.
It was like, okay, we got this lawsuit. Don't know exactly what it is.
Correct.
Here's a standard response.
And I thought that was ridiculous.
Yes.
Whereas I think with the Giants, yes, I think it's the timeliness in which you defend yourself is important. But I think more about the depth and full knowledge of knowing what you're defending against is paramount, especially something like this. So it doesn't bother me that it took an extra day. I know everybody wanted to see the Giants fire back quickly, more decisively. Giants got this right. They laid it out point by point, and ultimately we'll see where this goes. But I'll tell you this, we had Hugh Jackson on the show yesterday, right? And you and I both like Hugh, but the more Hugh Jackson talks, the more Hugh Jackson looks as if he's really reaching. And I'm not saying that there's a direct correlation to the Dolphins or the Giants or the Browns. I'm not saying that. But, Hugh Jackson did a lot of interviews yesterday. He went on ESPN, I don't know, did they leave chocolates and roses on the pillow for him? They didn't ask him a meaningful question. He came on this show, and we basically said, dude, respectfully, but dude, you were 336-1. You got an extension. Who the hell gets an extension when you're 336-1? And he backtracked and really got distance from everything that he intimated on Twitter the day before. I'm not saying Flores is going to go that route and rescind the civil suit, but so far, or the class action lawsuit, but so far, nobody else has joined him.
Yes.
Nobody.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that they won't, but the fact that he is still standing on the mountain by himself in a class action lawsuit is very interesting to me.
I mean, look, there's plenty of time, and this is not resolved in months. This will be resolved in years, by the way.
Or rescinded, or withdrawn.
Or withdrawn if it becomes a class action lawsuit. But, look, I just to steal Jay-Z's line, I didn't pass the bar, but I know a little bit, right? The class action has a ton of complications in it. One, you got to have a lot of participants say, I want to be a part of it. Two, a judge then has to determine, is this better served as a class action lawsuit, or is it better served as an individual lawsuit? And so they got to measure whether or not all of the potential members, potential being the key word, members of the class are similarly discriminated against, according to this suit, as Brian Flores. Like, is a head coach discriminated the same way as a offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator or a general manager, a front office position individual? And I can tell you right now, that's going to be the hardest thing. 2-3 years ago, there was one black general manager. Maybe 5 years ago, there was one black general manager in the NFL. Now there's 7. So we can say the Rooney Rule has been ineffective for hiring black head coaches in the National Football League. But BT, last year there were 12 black defensive coordinators. There was 4 black offensive coordinators. There's 8 black special teams coordinators. There was 3, maybe actually 4 with Pep Hamilton, who's no longer on the team. There were 4 black quarterback coaches in the National Football League. So it's working slowly in the coaching ranks. But from the executive ranks, it's actually done an amazing job. putting black candidates, minority candidates in front of owners and them actually landing those jobs.
Yeah.
And so the class, which he included all of these folks, is going to be really hard to fall in alignment with how this lawsuit is written.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I do.
There's some challenges to this. It brings up the conversation, obviously, and we're talking about it, and I guess that's part of the problem. But like I said before, you can't just use racism as a catch-all. Just because the Rooney Rule hasn't been working, you can't say, you know what, this is racist because they haven't figured out how to hire black coaches. You know, in some cases it may be true, but to blanket it and make it generalized.
Yeah, well, you weaponize it is what you do.
Exactly.
You weaponize it.
It's too incendiary.
You can't it's divisive.
That.
And by the
You're
way,
right.
there's some truth to it, too.
Of course
but,
there is.
You know, when it's just the all-encompassing one broad stroke, it's generally inaccurate and unfair to a lot of people, including – you know, good white coaches like Doug Peterson.
Yes.
So Leftwich, I don't blame Leftwich, by the way, didn't want to work with Trent Baalke.
That's right.
But because Leftwich doesn't really have a ton of juice, even though he's an ascending OC, he wanted, for those of you who missed this, he wanted the Jaguars to basically bounce Baalke. Now, I don't blame him.
Yep.
There's no way I would go work with Trent Baalke either. I know too much about the relationships he's had, and you do as well, and you and I were talking before the show. Take our word for it. You don't want to work with Trent Baalke. Trust me. So Leftwich said, I'm not going to take this job. They hired Doug Peterson, which, by the way, is a great hire. Super Bowl winning coach. Now, that is the 5th vacancy that's been filled of 9 jobs.
Yes.
All of whom are white.
Yes.
And, again, when you paint with that broad brush, yes, there's some things that are absolutely relevant to that discussion, but somebody like Doug Peterson, who, I don't know, won a Super Bowl, will be diminished in terms of his accomplishments, and that's what's wrong about this.
That's right.
You know, listen, it's going to be messy. It's going to be a little confusing. It's going to be irritating to some. We'll listen. We'll be fair. But it doesn't seem, while I do think that Flores is speaking his truth,
yes,
it doesn't seem to have the substance required, at least for me, and I think for you.
At least not yet.
That's what I mean, yet, as he stands by himself with nobody joining him. Maybe that changes, and maybe my opinion changes, but I mean, the Giants, good job defending yourself. You had to. 877-337-6666. All right, let's get to the phones. Randall get dealt yet? Did you hit refresh? Is he still here? Jacob's in Brooklyn. Jacob's in Brooklyn first up on the fan. Jacob, Tiki, and Tierney, how you doing today?
Hey, guys. What's up? Love the show.
Appreciate you, Jacob. How you doing, man?
What's up?
I'm doing good, thank God. I just wanted to bring to a point, which I didn't hear anyone address, which was that you have a lot of people in the world, you know, in America, looking at this whole situation and saying about the Brian Flores suit that I think it's a false premise, that they're calling the NFL. I'm not defending the NFL here because I can think they have a lot of problems. But in this instance, I think you could defend them and say people are saying they're racist and discriminatory based on, I think, a false premise of that you have less amount of African-American coaches, and because that's a low number, that means 1 + 1 = 2. Oh, it's discriminatory.
Yeah.
I don't get that premise. That this is a nuanced situation. There's a lot of factors here.
Yeah,
I don't understand that.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors because ultimately, as BT said, the first time we heard this argument, appreciate your call, Jacob, that you can't the owner and the general manager are going to hire who they want to hire as long as they go through the process the right way. And I think some of these, and by the way, John Elway really hit back hard as well on this suit. And gave some context to why he was disheveled because he had flown overnight and basically got off the plane and went right into that interview because Brian Flores gave that specific time, that morning slot is the only time he would be available for them. So teams are hitting back with their truths in contrast to Brian Flores' truths. But at the end of the day, a team is going to find a guy that they like. If they're black, if they're white, if whatever, if they're Hispanic, if they're Lebanese, like Robert Saleh, they're going to find their guy, and that's who they're going to go with. And just because you don't get it doesn't mean that you can claim it's racism.
I'm with you.
Right? It might be, but you can't stay at the whole process is racist.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't get. It just it obscures it. And then I get, I heard Kareem Abdul-Jabbar last night. I was on Anderson Cooper last night, BT, and they played Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's thoughts on this. And he's saying things like, I think the Giants were racist in how they handle these things or something of that nature. It's like you don't know anybody in this organization. You don't know the process as it works in the NFL. and he's referencing the NBA. Now, the NBA has done an amazing job.
They have 15, I think, minority coach. I think it's 14 or 15.
It's 14. 13 black head coaches in the NBA, which is 43% of the league. And it sounds like, man, that's amazing. A couple years ago, they were 20 or maybe 12%. They're 43% now. But think of how much easier it is for a player in the NBA. Ty Lue is a perfect example to walk off the court, do a couple years in media, and then go right into head coaching in NBA.
Mark Jackson, Jason Kidd, Doc Rivers, the list is long, man.
And I'm not saying it's
Isaiah
easy.
Thomas.
It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy.
Meaning easy to win or be successful.
No. To land a job
Gotcha.
as a former player, as the head coach, right? Kind of with no really, intermediate coaching experience in the NBA, because it's just different. Like you're managing 15 people, right? And there's a staff that's massive.
Well, you
around
also play both sides of the ball. So if you're Doc Rivers, you're a point guard. You're playing offense and defense,
and you get it.
Whereas if you're an offensive coordinator, you don't, or you played quarterback in the NFL.
That's right.
You don't have knowledge of defense in terms of coaching it necessarily.
That's right. You could be
easier to deploy.
The best defensive tackle or linebacker in the history of the game. You have no idea how to recognize and understand coverages that are happening on. Now, you have to hire a coordinator in order to do that, but it doesn't necessarily give you the upper hand to be the head coach. There's 53 active people on an NFL roster, 16 practice squad players. There's staffs of sometimes 20 to 30. You got to deal with all of the logistics of this massive, this massive undertaking of an NFL team, and you got to be prepared for that. You can't just throw somebody in there who doesn't have the experience to do it, because they will fail, and they will fail quickly. I think we've seen this in certain instances. I think Steve Wilkes, who we talked about yesterday, that's exactly what the stories were coming out of Arizona. It's just he was swimming in it. Like not that he was a bad guy, or maybe even potentially could have grown into a good coach, but he was swimming in the requirements to be a head coach. You go from talking to a DB room to talking to 80 guys. It's just a different type of leadership that it takes.
And he had a rookie quarterback too.
And he had a rookie quarterback. Exactly right. So I think sometimes we want to simplify this into a catch-all, and it just doesn't work. And it's frustrating to me, because it's so much more. It's so much deeper than what people want to lump this into, including people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job. Not a perfect job, but I think in this city, we've done a pretty good job with fair representation. I think. You look at the sports teams, and the Knicks have a million problems, but diversity is certainly nowhere on their list of issues.
That's
Going
right.
back to Isaiah and Steve Mills and Derek Fisher, who bombed, but Fizdale, who bombed, but they were given the opportunity to flourish, right? Jason Kidd was coach of the Nets. Omar Benaya was the GM of the Mets back in the day. By the way, his son's good. Omar's son, I saw him against Providence.
Oh, yeah?
Providence St. John's the other night.
Yeah.
Omar's son's good. Willie Randolph, who got the short end of the stick with the Mets for sure. They fired him at like 2 a.m. out west when they made him. I'll never forget that. When they made him fly out there and then they fired him, it was ridiculous. But Willie got a chance to be a skipper. Todd Bowles, Herm Edwards. I know I'm missing many names there, but I think, as we should, we're New York City. We should be ahead of the curve in terms of diversity, because it reflects our city. So with a team like the Giants, who have been so generous with their money and their time and their humanitarian efforts, for them to take arrows from people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's never had a conversation with anybody in the franchise, that is the height of weakness. That is the easy way out. And they had to defend themselves, and I'm proud that they did.
Me too.
877-337-6666. Tiki and Tierney on the Fan. We'll get some more calls. We'll do a little baseball. Where are we with the labor strife? Derek Jeter? The 28th best player of all time? Oh, by the way, Hoff, Randall, what's the update? Is he still here?
He's still here, but again, still not following Knicks on
Instagram.
Instagram.
All right. Tiki and Tierney on the Fan. More calls in a moment.